to somebody on the outside looking into that whole situation, if they didn't know somebody was on the ground, they wouldn't even think anything major was going on over there, because everybody was just, it was all so casual. You know, that man laying there dying that night didn't warrant a red light. He had complained to the staff that he was having a hard time breathing. He was having problems with his chest pains. And the psychiatric technician had told him to go lay down. My name is Rick Hazeltine, and I live on Unit 10, and Victor Segovia was my dorm mate. He was my friend. It was about 5 minutes to 4, and I had woken up. I needed to use the restroom, and I went into the restroom here on the unit. Right after I stepped into the bathroom stall, I had just closed the bathroom door, and I heard a loud slam, like somebody had slammed one of the stall doors. So I came out of the stall real fast, and I could see that somebody was laying on the floor in the handicap stall. Went to that stall really fast, and I pulled the door open, and I realized that it was my dormie, the guy who sleeps in the dorm with me, Victor Segovia. So I stepped over him, and I was calling his name, and he wasn't responding at all. And I was like shaking his back and calling his name and trying to get some response out of him. And I could see that his eyes were open, and you know that they were like moving, and I could tell that he was like clenching his fist. And I kept calling his name and like shaking his back, and he was struggling really bad to breathe. And there was another patient in the bathroom, and I told him to go get the officers. So the whole time I'm standing over him, and finally when the officers got there, I tell the officer that he's non-responsive. He's not responding to me at all. I keep calling his name, and so the cop is watching. He's not really saying anything, and I continue trying to get Weasel to respond somehow to see if he even recognizes that I'm there. And so this went on a few more minutes, and the officer didn't hit a red light. He did nothing. And I start getting upset, and I start raising my voice and telling the officer that they need to get some medical staff in here because he's non-responsive and he's having a very hard time breathing. Well, the officer threatens to remove me from the bathroom because he's concerned about me getting upset, but trying to light a fire under him to get him to see, take this like it was a serious situation. So the officer does nothing more. There's still no medical staff there. I'm looking at my watch. By this time, it's a few minutes after 4, and my dormie is still struggling to breathe. So I reach down with my left hand, and I grab his shoulder. I kind of like hook his shoulder with my hand, and I lift up his left shoulder a little bit. My intention was to take some of the weight off of his chest in the hopes that it would help him to breathe a little bit because nobody was there doing anything. And I couldn't get him to respond to me at all. And I'd been saying his name for 6-7 minutes at least, trying to get him to give me some sign that he was in there. I holler at the officer again, and I tell him, he's not responding at all, and he cannot breathe. And I ask him where the medical staff is, and his response to me was, well, it's nighttime, there's not that many people here. And the officer mentions to us that we might want to pull his shorts up, the guy's shorts up, because when he went down, his shorts were down around his ankles. So me and the other patient tried pulling his shorts up without moving him too much, without rolling him over. And we did. We succeeded to do it, and I stepped back around by the sinks, and I looked at my watch, and by then it was about 7 minutes after 4, and this had all started at about 5 minutes to 4. And I'm telling the staff and the cops, I'm not speaking to one specifically, but I said, man, he can't breathe. You need to get him out of here. And so then the officer stepped back up to me and threatened to remove me from the bathroom again. They never brought a oxygen mask or tank. They didn't do CPR. They didn't try and intubate him, nothing, even though it was clear as day that he couldn't breathe. He couldn't draw in air, and he was making these weird, like, sounds, like gasping sounds, but it was like there was something clogging his throat or something. I don't really know how to explain it. And finally, they got him. They were trying to. More officers came up. Another staff came up, and now it's like 10 minutes after 4, and they have to go get the gurney, and then they start having problems with the gurney because the belts are all tangled around the wheels, and they can't get it in there. Everybody's crowded in the door, all the officers, because they can't do anything but stand there and watch. And they finally get Weasel onto the backboard. They roll him over on his back, on the backboard. They don't put any brace on his neck. They don't try and mobilize him. Nobody's doing CPR. And they finally get the backboard up onto the gurney, and they wheel him out of the bathroom into the hallway. And the two staff that initially responded started to go back into the office and leave Victor on the gurney in the hallway. And one of the officers said, "Go, get out of here, get him down to medical unit." Then they turned from the direction that they were heading back into the office. I don't know what they were going to do. But then they got Victor and they pushed him off of the unit. And I couldn't tell at that point if he was still breathing or struggling to breathe or not, because by then they had gotten him onto his back. But they left at that point. Our unit was locked, so I couldn't leave. By the time, once they actually got him off the unit, they locked that front door. That was like 16 minutes after 4 when they finally left our unit. And MA2 is still down at the other end of the hallway, down another hall. So they had a long ways to go. I went back down to my room. I had gotten into bed. It'd been about 15 minutes total since they took Weasel off of the unit. It was like 4:30. And the cops came down to our room with flashlights, and they were packing up my dormie's stuff, which they don't ever do. They wait and see what's going to happen with the patient, whatever. Well, they didn't tell me, but at that point I think that he probably had already died, because they don't ever pack somebody up like that. They take him to medical or whatever they have to do. They assess the situation. Usually it's a couple days on MA2, and then they deal with the patient's property. But I think he had possibly already died, which couldn't have been but 15 minutes or so since that all ended. The whole scene in the bathroom was, it was just, there was absolutely no urgency. Nobody cared. It just seemed like it was no big deal. But he laid in that floor for 15 minutes minimum, struggling to breathe, and nobody did anything. They didn't attempt any chest compressions, breathing, ambu bag, nothing. They didn't mouth-to-mouth, no machines, no oxygen. They did absolutely nothing but let that man sit there and struggle to breathe for 15 minutes and ultimately die.